So, good afternoon. My name is Shaun Farrell. Today I'm going to talk to you about digital project management and whatever that might mean. So, who am I? That's me. What have I done in the past? Well, my background is an architectural technologist. I don't even have those in Russia. I worked for 25 years in architecture. The last 3 years I worked for Zaha Hadid. When I finished working at Zaha's, I came here and worked at the Gutenberg project with Mace in St. Petersburg. So Ilya, who presented just before, was in my team. So I gave him a job for Mace. It's my fault he works for Autodesk. And Igor, I didn't see you sneak in as well. I'm currently working on large projects in London. Any of you may not know that's the Shell Tower building. So if you've seen New Year's Eve on the television in London, that's where they project onto. I'm also leader of the London BIM region, and I am also in the UK BIM Alliance, and I was one of the first 60 Autodesk elites in the world back in 2009. So who here has heard of Turner & Townsend? Yeah, one. So we are a project management, cost management, and advisory company based in the UK. We've got 4,400 staff worldwide, 44 countries, and 104 offices. So I'm going to talk to you today about what we do in our advisory division. So we understand that projects don't just happen in the middle. They're set up, and there's handover, and there's information to be used afterwards. So we have 4 divisions within the advisory division. So we have contract services. That's a whole other presentation. We have consulting, a whole other presentation. We have operational excellence, a whole other presentation. My team that I represent is a technology team. So there are 76 of us in our technology team, which cover data analytics, capital projects. So they're the only people who actually build stuff in our company. And we have my team, the BIM team, and solutions advisory. So I didn't realize there was a screen down here. Shows what happens when you don't practice. There's one down here. I can stop looking up there now. So has anybody seen this curve before, the hype curve? Anybody ever looked it up? A couple of people have seen it. It's a fun one. It's when technology comes along, it starts in the bottom left. Everybody thinks, it's fantastic, it's going to be wonderful, we'll have self-driving cars. They end up at the top. Then they realize self-driving cars are a complete load of rubbish at this point in time. So you drop into this thing called the trough of disillusionment, where you tried something, you got burnt, nobody wants to do it anymore. But eventually, things actually start to turn up, and you actually see some use out of some of these technologies. So drones, when they first came out, we all thought we were going to have pocket drones. Now we're actually seeing them useful. So how do we actually get to that point in time? Well, I've done a version of this Gartner's hype. How much time and effort would you save of walking backwards and forwards, checking things, if you knew the data in your machine were correct? So here's an example I've got. That's Navisworks. That's what we built. That's Navisworks. That's what we built. They're still building that because that was only taken 2 weeks ago. It's now got more on top of it. So I'm going to ask you a question. This obviously may not work in this audience, but if we looked at digital or success, give me an answer in one word. Does anybody want to have a go at it? What does either BIM or digital success mean to you in one word? What's the first word that comes to mind? Anybody want to have a go? Go on, somebody's feeling brave. Time, okay. Anyone else? Complicated, awkward, expensive, pain in the bum? Impression, okay. So, what I'd like to demonstrate with that is that everyone's impression or idea is different. We're not all the same. So when somebody says, we're going to go digital, we're going to go BIM, no wonder there's confusion because it means different things to different people. I'm going to show you now the impact of what digital success looks like. There's a 10-20-70 rule. 10% of the success is down to the tool you use. Whether you use Revit, AutoCAD, any other platform, only 10% of the success will come from the tool you've chosen. 20% of that success will come from the process you wrap around that. Can anybody guess what the 70% remaining is? People. All the stuff I'm showing you today, it all comes from case studies and work we've done. So I'm not allowed to actually say what jobs because clients get very precious about what you tell. So it's all derived from work we've done. So I haven't made that up. That's proved time and time again that's actually what happens. There's another actual thing that works into threes, by the way. It's not 10, 20, 70. It's the fact that the three things that impact the use of technology: battery life, access to Wi-Fi, and bandwidth. Now, if you're at your desktop, don't have to worry about battery. If you're connected to an Ethernet cable, you don't have to worry about Wi-Fi. And if you're sat at your desk, then bandwidth is usually pretty good, unless you're in a really poor office. And everybody gets on at the same time at lunchtime to watch YouTube and kittens, and then the bandwidth goes through the floor. But so when you look at adopting new technologies, bear those three things in mind, because they contribute to that success as well. They're firmly in the tool sector, so even the tool part is broken into three further pieces on how well it's going to get used. Have you heard of the UK BIM mandate and all those sort of fun things, and that the UK's leading BIM? If only that were true. It is true, but it's a battle every day. So the reason that the UK took interest in it was cost and carbon. We've had report after report after report that demonstrates the construction industry is broken and needs to be fixed. And the two things that the government focused on were reducing costs and reducing carbon. So that's why all these other countries, Singapore started doing it in the 80s. But this is why all these other governments are saying, we need to do it because we need to save costs and we need to reach the carbon agenda. On the right-hand side, we're looking at clients. And those clients are saying, well, the need they have is better quality information, better decision-making. They want to be able to actually make sure that they're doing this. Cost certainty is a big one. Don't get me started on the whole lecture I have on cost versus value and what's the difference. That's a fun one. You can catch me after if you want to hear me rant on that one. Health and safety is a big one. Nearly every organization we work with, their top priority is health and safety, above anything, above cost. Human life comes first. And then whole life cycle. Has anybody seen this diagram before? It comes out of the UK documentation. Essentially, we're saying, what's the relationship between information and management and delivery? So on the right, that's split across there. Let's do the whole diagram. On the right-hand side are the models. So everyone focuses around the models. But how do we get to those models? Well, on the left-hand side, the client tells you what goes in those models. Not the supply chain, not the contractor, not the designer, the client. They're paying for it. They define what they want. If the client can't define what they want, they need to get some help from someone who can help them with that, which is where we do a lot of that helping. And a couple of documents, you've probably all heard of EIRs or CIRs or whatever, so information requirements. Here, they usually encapsulate them all into one document. When you work with large organization, you have these other two documents called the organizational information requirements and the asset information requirements, because many organizations are going to repeat this project. So those two documents are a strategic level, they're related to business, they're related to operations and assets. The EIR is per project. My personal favorite. This one, when I showed this to people yesterday, they quite like this one. This starts really upsetting people. So if we start looking at what uses can you put data to through the life cycle of a project. So I'm going to, you can't really see it there, but you'll be able to see it in the downloaded version. So in the UK, we have work stages. In Russia, you have these similar stages as well. So in the UK, we have three called strategic, preparation, and concept. You have one called technological and economical, and it sort of encapsulates all those three. Then we have design stages. So you have stage project. Get in. My Russian's getting better. Technical design. You have working design. We have construction and handover. You have construction all in one go, which includes handover. And then, not forgetting, someone's got to use it after. Gone are the days where you could build something, hand the keys over, and run away. Those days are gone. We were talking this morning, when you look at the keynote, we've got to understand about data and changing relationships and working more with our clients. You will not be able to walk away from your projects anymore. In the UK, and certainly in the US and in Europe, we're seeing, I know it seems really strange now to say UK and Europe separately, but that's another conversation for another day. We're looking at the fact that pretty soon you're going to be responsible for your life. If you build it and you design it, you're intended to look after it for its entire life cycle. So if something goes wrong with it in 20 years, back you come. So what are we looking at? So if you see down the bottom, in green we've got achievable, in orange we've got achievable but challenge, and in red we've got unachievable. So we're looking at what can you do with data. So right the way through the project, you can develop appraisals, you can do marketing at the end, we can have costing up until technical design. All these fantastic things we can use data for. Loads of them. All that you can use data in projects. I'm not expecting you to read it because it will probably take you longer than my presentation. But what is important is, can you see those diamonds and those dotted lines? In order to do it up here, that's when you've got to plan to do it, instruct it, and put it in their contract. If you don't, this happens. So you say, okay, well, we've done the, oh, there, that's better, we can hear me. We've done the strategic, we've done the preparation, we're 2/3 of the way through concept. We're now going to instruct, we're going to go digital. All those things that have now changed orange. So is anybody, are you familiar with the concept of asset management? I'm not sure if it's actually an industry here. So asset or facilities management. FM? Is it a big market here? So in residential, does it tend to get left to the residents, or I can't remember if there was an operating agency that then looks after the residents. So one of the targeted growth areas in the UK is FM. So whilst BIM and digital delivery has always been about the middle, so the design and construction, there's the strategy that comes before, and then there's the object that you're going to use afterwards. And the object you can use afterwards is very much around about assets and facilities. So operating costs. Has anybody ever seen the diagram about the difference between design cost and final operating cost? It's quite terrifying. So essentially it says if the construction cost is 1 unit, if the design cost is 1 unit, the construction cost is 5 units, the operational cost is 200 units, and the impact on the business is somewhere around 800 units. So the 20 to 60 years after you finish construction, there you can see why that would be 200 times the cost of building the building in the first place. So what we're actually looking at is saying, what impact can you make in that 1 unit that could reduce the costs in the 800 unit? So some of the things we're seeing actually asked for. So at handover, so when you finish construction, is to look at, could they actually have a list of everything you've built? That would be nice. Because there's actually a whole industry that sprang up by the fact that we design, we construct, we deliver, but when you hand it over at the end, and poor Igor is dealing with this at the moment, when you come to look at your documentation, where is it? No one can find it. Did they ever create it in the first place? So part of the growth industry is monitoring the production of that information through the life cycle. So the moment you instantiate something into the model, it starts the asset off. The moment you then instantiate that digital asset into its real-world twin, that starts off the facilities management. I have installed it, it's in place. I want the documentation for it now, not in 3 years' time when you finish it. So we're seeing a lot of that information turning up as you go, so progressive delivery. So a lot of people are used to saying, oh, when do you get your as-built? Well, we built the foundation 5 years ago. We've built the building and we've handed it over. Here's your as-built of the foundation. It's a bit late to check it because you've just buried it 4 years ago. So we're seeing now progressive requirements. So as a client or as a recipient of information, so we have the challenge in the fact in residential, so I'll pick on residential again. With residential is the fact that the operator at the end doesn't exist at the beginning. So usually the developer will build the apartment block and then find someone to operate it. So they have no understanding of what the operator needs to run the building. So what actually happens is, so they hand over a package of information, and then someone comes along and goes, well, that's all wrong. The client pays again for information you've just built to go and find out everything he should have known when you handed it over. And we're now seeing clients actually paying more money for that information. They'll actually say, do whatever you want to do, over here. Keep going, that's it. Do whatever you want to do over here. We're not going to pay for drawings because we don't need them. However, if you give me an asset list over here, I'll pay 5 times for that because they know they don't have to pay for it again later. One thing that we haven't got in my slide deck, it's a scary figure, that's why I didn't put it in there. How many, for a single piece of information, what do you think is the worst case scenario? How many times does a client pay for it? So this room, you measure it, you report its size. How many times do you think a client pays for that? 1? 5? 10? 67 times? For the same information, they'll pay for it 67 times because the contract says so. It's interesting, I don't know if it's the same in UK contracts, but if you look at maybe Russian contracts, it'll say that before going on site, the contractor is responsible for measuring the area of work and checking it. How many contractors do you have on site? You multiply that by the same area. So in here, you'd have structure, finishes, furniture, lighting, ceilings, windows. They'd all measure the same room because their contract says so. So if you want to start looking at making savings, do something about that. Right, let's blast on through. Thank you very much, by the way, for bringing that back to life. I appreciate it. Well done. It wasn't easy. So, we've seen the...
We're running out of time.
Yes?
About 5 minutes.
Yes, I can get it all done in 5 minutes. I'll go really, really quickly. I'm sorry if I get out of breath and your brain gets out of breath, but we'll give it a go. So, this is going to be probably the fastest I've done this, so I apologize. So we're looking, you've heard of common data environments? It's a wonderful phrase. By the way, you cannot buy one. Sorry, Autodesk, but if you say you're setting a common data environment, you can't. What you can do is buy components of it. So we're looking at the fact that everybody should feed into it. Stop, if you're sending anything that's not a meeting invite by email, stop today and send it through a collaboration platform. You're not helping. So how do we look at how we help clients and how do we do it? So first off, do you need digital? Some companies don't. They really don't. So first off, don't steam in and say, we're going to do digital. Actually work with them and say whether they do. When they do, when you have figured out what it is you need to do, then you write those documents I talked about earlier. Then you set up your collaboration platform. Then you actually start engaging with your supply chain. And then because of all this, you're able to unlock things like zoning, 3D planning, costing, visualization, FM. If you don't do any of this planning, you're never going to get there. Because what everybody focuses on is the next bit, which is after you've done your planning, you're then able to go in and do your information management, and more importantly, your assurance and your checking. So without that planning, this isn't going to happen. And then you're able to do your reporting and lovely dashboards. So when we're appointing designers, remember to add the digital overlay. So send out the EIRs. Also, it's the client's responsibility to assess their supply chain. If the supply chain says, yeah, we can do that, don't believe them. Sorry, that's brutal, but you don't. Because they know how to do it their way, not your way. And you as the client, you want it done your way. Same as when we do with the contractor. The difference being is that you also hand over all the designer's information. So if you've got any designers that say they're not going to share their information, sack them. That's fire them or send them to Siberia, one of the two. So what's the impact on costing? We can take early data and we can pretty much get a simple pounds per square meter benchmark from something as simple as a massing model. Not a problem. Usually that's within 15% cost accuracy because we've got the data that backs it up. Then when you actually get more complex models, we can then start doing elemental and composite component breakdown. Those figures show how the guess, the actual, and the planned costs get closer and closer to reality. And then eventually we'll be able to predict what the cost in use is because that data is enriched over time. Because you ask for the right data at the right time, you can make the right decisions. What does the real common data environment look like? So this is a pretty picture that you'll see in PAS. It's a lovely idea. Doesn't really work in reality because people think you can buy that as one system. What we're actually seeing is the one on the left, that's on your local area network, or as we all know, on everyone's C drive. That's the reality of it. People say they use local area networks, but you've probably all got more data on your C drive than you've got in your projects. Then you'll have an electronic document management system, which is where you're going to share information, so things like BIM 360, Vault, other products like that. Then we're seeing, in reality, there's a break line. For the simple reason is there's been a recent court case where it's now illegal to disconnect your client from the system. So if you're an architect or if you're a contractor that has one of these systems, you give your client a login, yeah? If you ever turn that off, they're allowed to take you to court. So we're seeing now more and more that you'll actually get that clean break, and that's now a client system. You're putting that information into the client system so they cannot be separated from the data that is rightfully theirs. And those are on EDMSs. We're also seeing breaks at that point. So sometimes a designer will have their own system, and then to put it on a shared platform, they'll put it on yet another system. And then likewise, we'll see, if this is a developer scenario, the one on the left at the bottom is a developer, the one on the right could be the operator, so it then needs to go into their system. So all this time, this data is moving around. I've already covered these. What do we see FM asking for? So we're asking for a full asset list, so they want to know everything that they're going to own when you hand it over. They're going to should actually define what an asset actually is. That's another conversation. What is an asset? For some people, it's an entire road. For some people, it's a plug socket. Space names and schemas, space classifications, full asset data schemas, and validating of the above. All that is provided by the client, by the way, to the supply chain. The supply chain don't make that up. That's provided by the client. Or if you're unlucky, it's provided later by the operator. And when is it going to be done? Because the BIM process and the digital process says it shall be done progressively, and therefore we want to capture it. 5 minutes, I'm probably down to 3. All right, this is a good one, and I apologize for rushing through this one. So what does a digital asset look like? What should you model? So on the right-hand side, these are actually objects you'll put in your model. So something that looks like something. So it'll be a 3D object that looks like a piece of equipment. It looks like a door. Or it could be a space or a room only. You don't model anything else. We've got asset models that contain no doors, no windows. It just contains spaces. And assets models as entire systems. On the left-hand side, we're now going to look at what data could be hosted. So is the data actually in the model hosted on the objects? Or is it only a link? So you click on something and it goes to another database. Or is it simply a reference? There's no link. There's just a code that says, look this code up in another system, and you search for it. Now, you can imagine, you can actually have any cross configurations of those that you like. So you could actually have, in the same project, 3D objects that have hosted data. You could have space rooms that have linked data. All those combinations in one project. There will not be one method inside a project. I'll skip over case studies to save time. Needless to say, my favorite one is on the left. So we looked at assets, and it's interesting because I sat down with Expertisa 2 years ago, and they had the same problem. At the end of the project, if we'd have delivered traditional soft copy documents, they would have to build a $3 million installation to hold 163 shipping containers of paper. It's fine, it was in the desert, it wouldn't have got wet, but it would have meant they'd have to employ an army of people to find stuff. Or we gave them a 5 terabyte hard drive for 80 quid. You can imagine which one they went for. Final slides. So traditional delivery looks like this. Delivering documents, PM and CM, architect, stage 1, go through the stages. Everybody's exchanging documents. Actually, everyone's authoring a brand new bespoke document every time. So every one of those represents a new document. That's your traditional process. And in the end, you hope that they actually have some standards and some sense between them. If you take a data-led delivery, you may well still start with a document, but the moment that document is authored, it's digitized. And we start looking at data in databases and start looking at shared systems and feeding that information in so people progressively over time add their slice of the database and enrich the data as you go. Always on, always there, always available, always right. But to enable that, remember I was saying tools, processes, and people? You're still going to need a digital PM delivery team to do your information management, assuring the data, and then managing that data. Because it's new, it's not paper. You could retrain the paper people, but as I showed you right back at the beginning, if people think they're literally stacking digital on top of a cave painting, you need to re-educate them culturally that they're not doing that anymore. We're looking at the digital twin. Final thing I'd like to talk to you about, and I think we may well have achieved this today, I'm not entirely sure, but communication between me and you. I have a concept in my head. I need to get that concept into your head. Now, I'll give you an example of it quickly now. I am a bird, what am I? I am a bird that swims, what am I? I'm a bird that quacks and swims. What am I? You pretty much know now I'm a duck or a goose. But it's narrowing that down in that communication. So how do we communicate? We communicate by seeing things. We communicate by listening. By the way, listening and hearing are not the same things. Listening is an active activity. Hearing is a passive activity. Many people look like they're listening. All they're doing is they're waiting for you to stop so they can talk. Talking, as you evidently seen I like to do. And then drawing or forming things. Where do we need to go? We need to be able to move, hopefully. Come on, you can do it. It's the last slide. Seeing into the digital realm. We need to move drawing and forming into the digital realm. We need to be able to talk through the digital realm. We still need to listen. So I challenge you to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your